got quiet very quickly. We were having so much fun catching up, and then a bunch of us looked at our watches and said, I think we should probably start, which shows how collegial our industries are together. So welcome to today's open house event, which is focused on interagency satellite payload review and the process that goes with it. The payload review process is led by our colleagues at the Federal Aviation Administration, but it also has components that involve the State Department, the Department of Commerce, and of course, the FCC. Today, we'll walk through the interagency process. Our goal is to provide a common understanding of what happens at the government level as part of the payload review and how we work together. We want to ensure that industry stakeholders understand the process and understand how to approach licensing and authorization to avoid having issues flagged with their spacecraft before launch. We want to make sure our processes are transparent, which can lead to successful and timely payload reviews. Yippee. We'll note that there is already some documentation relative to our discussion today, the FAA Advisory Circular 43.31-1 on applying for FAA determination on policy or payload reviews. Oh, I'm sorry, and I'm reading Marissa's. I just looked, I'm like, why am I reading Marissa's? Anyway, welcome, friends. Now, it's like, this is not enough coffee today. Anyway, this is part of our Transparency Initiative series. I'm going to introduce the panel and step away, as you probably would like me to do. It is my honor to introduce our illustrious panel. That's my lane. Sabrina Jowett, Manager, Commercial Space Law Team at the Federal Aviation Administration. Stacy Z, Manager, Operations Support Branch at the FAA. Ryan Guglietta, Lead Foreign Affairs Officer, Office of Space Affairs at the Department of State. And Glenn Talia, Chief Weather Satellites and Research Section, Office of the General Counsel, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. And our fabulous Space Bureau team, Carl Kensinger, our Special Counsel, and Marissa Velez, Chief of the Satellite Programs and Policy Division. I would also like to recognize the Space Bureau team involved in preparing for this event: Jeanette Kennedy, Whitney Lohmeyer, Carl Kensinger, Marissa Velez, Janine Poltoneri, Brandon Paget, our AV team here in the Commission meeting room. They are very patient with us, by the way. And of course, our security team. And now I'll turn it over to Marissa Velez, Chief of the Satellite Programs and Policy Division, and take it away. You can read my remarks if you wish.
Thanks, Julie, and welcome again, everyone. Good morning. We're so excited to have the ability to convene this meeting on a topic that so many of our joint stakeholders are engaged on, and we're thrilled to have the panelists here today from our agency colleagues. I'll just pick up where Julie left off and mention a couple of resources that are already in existence related to some of these topics. And we're also planning to provide links to these resources on the FCC's transparency website. So just to mention, the FAA has several resources, including their advisory circular on applying for FAA determination on policy or payload reviews, as well as the FAA's policy on requiring disclosure of payload contents. There's a variety of resources available on the NOAA Commercial Remote Sensing Regulatory Affairs website. And for the FCC, we do have a 2018 enforcement advisory on the need for satellite licensing prior to satellite integration into a launch vehicle. And we're also putting together additional information as a follow-on to this event. So now I'm glad to be able to go ahead and start our discussion with the panel here. And first I'll turn to our FAA colleagues, Sabrina and Stacy. Could you introduce yourselves and just give us an overview of the payload review process?
Sure. Can you all hear me all right? Awesome. So my name is Stacy Z. I'm the manager of the Operations Support Group at FAA. I'm within the licensing division, so our group actually does all the license evaluations and thusly the payload coordination with the different agencies. Is it possible to put these up, or if not, I can just talk to them. So I just put together some slides just so you could start with sort of an understanding of our licensing. Some of you may already know this, but it sort of sets the stage of where the payload processing falls within. So the Office of Commercial Space Transportation within the FAA has the authority to license space operations. So unlike the rest of the FAA, our authorities fall under Title 51. So the things that we license are launches and reentries of vehicles, the operation of launch and reentry sites. We issue safety element approvals and independent payload approvals as well. Can I just divide? Oh gosh. Okay, thank you. Okay, so our overall authority focuses on public safety. Our evaluation process, the goal is to protect public health and safety, safety of property, U.S. national security and foreign policy interests, and then any international obligations. And we do not really regulate beyond these public safety measures. And one thing I didn't mention on the previous slide, we do not license like the vehicles themselves. A lot of the FAA certifies things, we just do operations. This just outlines our licenses and permits. We have the majority fall under 420 and 433 for a license to operate a launch site. Obviously, we don't have a payload review in there. Part 450 is our newer launch and reentry licensing requirements. Sabrina will get more into the nuts and bolts of our regulations. So we included this slide to be able to show you kind of how the overall process works, just to give some understanding of the touch points with our agency. So our agency starts with pre-application consultation, and we even have sort of an initial discussion phase where we're working with operators who just start to have ideas. During the pre-app phase is where they start to bring information to us, and this is where operators want to bring in new things, things that we should be looking at, maybe need to make policy decisions on, and Sabrina will get more into that. But once we start we help the applicants pull together their application materials. We may start a safety review, an environmental review, and it's once we deem the application sort of complete enough that we have enough information to start an evaluation that we accept the application and start our evaluation. So it's within that stage 2, that evaluation period, where our interagency review takes place. And that's where we're working with the different agencies on our policy and payload reviews. And then once we get through the evaluation phase, we make a licensing determination. And then if a license is issued, we do have safety inspection, we may have other monitoring requirements that come into play. Now I'm going to pass it over to Sabrina to talk more about the interagency review process.
Sure. Thanks, Stacy. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the FCC for hosting us. My name is Sabrina Jawed. I am also at the FAA in our Office of Chief Counsel. I am the branch manager for our commercial space law branch in our regulations division. So our division oversees sort of all of the legal aspects of the FAA's regulations related to commercial space transportation. Let's see. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Can I grab that clicker? Thank you very much. Okay. So as Stacy was mentioning, part of the licensing process includes the interagency review process. And that is when we get to talk to all of our lovely colleagues sitting up here about whether or not what is being proposed, both for the operation and also for the payload that may be carried on the operation, whether or not there are any issues with national security, foreign policy, or any other obligations that the United States may have. So under the Outer Space Treaty, for example, which I'm sure our Department of State colleague Ryan will be getting into later. This interagency review process is conducted as a part of the licensing process as a whole on both the payload and the policy side. So I'm going to get into some details about how you can apply for a payload determination, because there are kind of 2 different pathways. But either way, we will review as an interagency that particular payload, which means that we provide information to our partners, to include Department of State, DOD, NOAA, FCC, NASA, and any other agency that we think may have an interest or may have some information to provide on the payload. And those agencies will take a look at the information we provide, and they will let us know if there are any issues. So let's get into the legal framework. First and foremost, as Stacy mentioned, we are under Title 51, Chapter 509. That is our statutory authority for the FAA to license launches, reentries, spaceports, et cetera. In Title 51, we have a definition of payload, and that definition is reflected in our regulations in sections 401.5 and 401.7. A payload means an object that a person undertakes to place in outer space by means of a launch vehicle, including components of the vehicle specifically designed or adapted for that object. I also want to add something else that's interesting in terms of payloads, and Marissa mentioned one of our policies on identifying all components of a payload during the payload review. In that policy, the FAA also describes what is meant by a hosted payload. So for y'all that work in this area, you're probably familiar with the fact that our payloads are getting increasingly complex and complicated. They can include more than just one payload. They can include multiple hosted payloads. And because a payload review's intent is to make sure that that payload does not jeopardize public health and safety when it is carried during launch, or if it is integrated and brought back during reentry, it's very important that we know everything that is on the payload. So in that policy, we state that hosted payloads are space-bound items included on a launch vehicle, reentry vehicle, or payload that use available power, mass, or space of the primary payload or launch or reentry vehicle, and that may be owned by a party other than the primary payload owner or launch reentry vehicle operator. So all of that to say that it's important that we know everything that's on the payload, even if there may be a hosted payload owned by another entity. So once we know what a payload is, we do have the statutory authority to conduct a payload review. And our statutory authority specifically says that the holder of the license or permit under Chapter 509 may launch or reenter a payload only if the payload complies with all of the requirements of the laws of the United States related to launching or reentering that payload. Those requirements would include, of course, the FAA's requirements, the FCC's requirements, should they fall under the FCC's purview, NOAA's requirements, states' requirements, right? So specific to the FAA's requirements, and I'll get into some of the details here, our payload review and determination requirements and our regulations are at 14 CFR, section 450.43, and the overarching ability for the FAA to issue a positive payload determination is in A, subsection A. So specifically, the applicant, payload owner, or payload operator must have obtained all required licenses, authorizations, and permits, and they must demonstrate that the launch or reentry will not jeopardize public health and safety, safety of property, national security, or foreign policy interests or obligations of the United States. So let's pause here. First and foremost, who can apply for a payload review? Like I said, there's two paths, right? So one person, one entity, one path is a payload owner or operator may apply for an independent payload review. And what I mean by independent is separate from a launch license. We generally see this if we're talking about payloads that are novel, that may be carrying unique materials, like, for example, nuclear materials. Or that may have additional complications. An example of that may be a payload that is being launched as a payload and is reentering as a reentry vehicle, right? So in these instances, a payload owner or operator may want some validation from the US government that this payload can be launched safely, and they may apply independently for a review from the FAA. Alternatively, and what we tend to see most frequently, is a payload review that is conducted as part of the overall license evaluation, which is what Stacy spoke to. So as part of a license evaluation, regardless of whether or not the payload owner or operator obtained a positive payload approval separately, the licensee is required to provide all the necessary materials for the FAA to conduct a payload review for any payloads that are going up on a licensed launch. So in that instance, you may have a licensee who applies to the FAA and includes all of the relevant payload information as part of their license application. The second part that I would point out here is that the FAA does not make a determination under paragraph A2 of this section for those aspects of payloads that are subject to regulation by the FCC and Commerce, or for payloads that are owned or operated by the U.S. government. So for U.S. government owned and operated payloads, the FAA will not do a licensing evaluation or a payload review evaluation. For payloads that require an FCC license or a NOAA license, we will not be reviewing that payload for those aspects that are specific to the FCC or NOAA license. This is to ensure that we are not duplicating efforts. We generally will, however, look at that payload still for safety. Okay, so now we're getting into the smaller text of the regulation. I will talk to this at a higher level. The FAA can review for an individual payload, or they may review for a class of payloads. This is all laid out in the regulation. We spoke to the fact that an owner or an operator may apply, and we also spoke to interagency consultation, but I would point out that that consultation is also included and laid out in our regulation itself, so we are required to do that. If there are any issues that arise as the FAA is reviewing your payload application, the FAA will notify in writing of those issues, and the applicant has the opportunity to correct any deficiencies. Additionally, if the FAA chooses to deny your payload determination, you do have the opportunity to appeal for a hearing, and those are contained in a separate section of the requirements that lay out sort of your hearing rights. Finally, we spoke to the fact that if you have a favorable payload determination, you could include it as a licensee in your license application, and that will speed up the process. So we talked a little bit about getting an approval in advance, especially if you're talking about a more complicated or complex or novel payload. If you do get that approval in advance, it may behoove your license, it may help your launch operator, because that launch operator can incorporate the favorable determination in their license application, and that sort of speeds up the process of the payload review when the FAA conducts it as part of the overall license evaluation. Okay, now the really small text. So in 450.43i, we have all of the application requirements for launch of a payload, which is in I-1, or for re-entry of a payload, which is on the next slide. This includes sort of what you would expect, right? A general description, the class, if you have any hazardous materials on board. There are a couple of things that I wanted to speak to a little bit more specifically here. So, for example, one of the requirements is that you identify any foreign ownership of the payload or payload operator as specified in, and then we give a lovely cross-reference. The reason for this is because it enables the FAA, Department of State, and the Department of Defense to assess any implications of proposed launch of payloads by providing foreign ownership, for example, the percentage of foreign ownership. This facilitates interagency coordination. So that is the purpose of that. And then in addition, I would point to the encryption requirement. Cybersecurity is so hot right now, so we do have a requirement to identify any encryption associated with data storage. This is to assist, again, with NASA, FAA, and DoD's assessment of any cybersecurity risks that could be associated with your payload. For example, if there are any weaknesses in the security that may cause the payload to be hacked in some way that could affect the launch, that could lead to a public safety incident. DoD frequently requests this particular information, and we have stated in our advisory circular that if you're using certain standards that have already been cleared, so for example, there's a 256-bit advanced encryption standard, as well as a NIST FIPS 140-2 and 140-3 standard. If you are using any of these approved standards, you can just kind of say so, and that will be great. And then finally, at the very end of this list, we do have a nice little catch-all, any other information necessary to make a determination. There may be instances where during the interagency review, other agencies may ask for additional information because something has come up or they have additional questions. And so the FAA may require operators to submit additional information, particularly for very unique missions. And then we also have information requirements for the re-entry of a payload, very similar, a little bit shorter. Okay, so The last thing that I'll mention before I hand this back over to Stacy to talk about some nuts and bolts is that we do have a requirement for registration of space objects. So this is also related, right, to payloads. And that requirement is in 450.217. And I would point out that that requirement is actually can be satisfied after the licensed activity. So the requirement states that no later than 30 days after the licensed activity, the licensee must provide information on each object placed in space by the launch, and that is to ensure that the U.S. government satisfies all of its requirements under the Registration Convention, and I will let Ryan speak more to that later.
Thanks, Sabrina. So I'm just going to give you a quick sort of overview of the nuts and bolts of how does this interagency review happen. So currently, actually, we have Matt from our office. Say hi, Matt. He does probably about 99% of our interagency reviews. So we have the list of the different. We've contacts from our different agencies that we send the information out to. We've recently set up a shared site to make it a little bit easier, and we're trying for companies that have a lot of launches to try to batch some of those reviews. Another thing that Matt and I are doing right now is just trying to meet with the individual agencies, and we're hoping to make that more of a biannual thing to really check in as we're moving to this shared site and try to just come up with better ways that we can communicate information, just knowing the industry's growing. We're going to have a huge number of these coming in the future, and that's only growing, and to know that we want to keep our process improving, every step that we can for efficiencies. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Just as a follow-up question, I was wondering if you could describe, so in a case where the launch vehicle operator is the applicant that's providing the information to the FAA, when does the FAA, or with FAA, typically receive that information prior to a launch? And can you give us any more information in terms of some of the timing considerations?
So I can start. So that's submitted, if you remember the licensing discussion during our evaluation process is when we coordinate. So if it's a vehicle operator coordinating the payload review, it's during that application evaluation process, and that's when we send the information out. If it's a payload, it still would be after we accept their application if it's just the payload operator trying to get their own individual review. Do you want to add anything to that? That's good.
Thank you. And then I was wondering if you maybe had an example of a type of concern that could come up during the interagency review process. Noting that I know our other colleagues may have want to speak directly to some of the issues that come up during their review, but just in general.
Yeah, I mean, most of the issues that I guess I'll let the different agencies speak specifically to them, but a lot of it is, going back and forth and getting some additional information, and it really is specific to each different agency. And since we were going to put together some slides on that, but since folks are here today to talk about that, I'll let them speak to it, and then we can always circle back if there's additional questions.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll go ahead and open up the discussion with some of the other panelists. Ryan, as our colleague from the State Department, could you introduce yourself and maybe provide a little bit of an overview of the State Department's role in the payload review process?
Sure, happy to. Thanks, Marissa, and thanks to everyone for being here and inviting me today. So State, is not a regulator compared to many others on this panel, so we kind of have a different role in that. But as Stacy and Sabrina noted in the payload review process, considerations for foreign policy and international obligations are part of that process, and State is certainly involved in kind of helping to make those assessments. So when we participate in the payload review, we want to make sure that whatever is being launched would say comply with the Outer Space Treaty. I think many agencies would object to if an item was launched that could be considered a weapon of mass destruction, for instance, but State would certainly object to that because that would violate the Outer Space Treaty. And then, more broadly too, if there are concerns about how that may affect or become a hazard in the environment, that could be something that we would want to flag as well, also based on the Outer Space Treaty. And then also just kind of foreign policy considerations in general. Like, is this consistent with U.S. foreign policy? Will this create a big problem for us in that regard? And then, we can kind of raise those objections with our FAA colleagues and try to find a solution to that. The other aspect that State is involved in that the two other aspects. One that I'm not very involved in, and our colleagues in another bureau, is kind of the export control licensing aspect of things. So state will issue licenses for export control related issues, and that can also be relevant for, say, recovering an object in, say, the territorial waters of another country and things like that. So that is a process that state is also involved. And then two, for the launch, one thing that our office also does, we will often send a cable to posts during a launch about, hey, this will be going over your territory if anything were to fall, et cetera, just giving notice to that. So we also try to communicate with other countries as well if a launch is occurring and if there's anything that they should be aware of. And the other main thing that our office in particular does is the space object registration process. So per the Outer Space Treaty and Registration Convention, parties to the treaty are meant to register their objects with the UN as kind of a transparency measure. There are certain basic orbital parameters and characteristics that are also conveyed, as well as where the launch site is and things like that. So that's been something that our office has done for quite a long time. You can imagine in the 60s and 70s that was a pretty straightforward process because you just had governments launching objects, and determining who the proper state of registry was quite easy. The state of registry is a launching state, and the launching state is defined as where the territory from which that object was launched, or what entity procured that launch. But what we have found recently is that has become a much more complicated question. And I think, if we could just go to the slides. I just have a couple on the registration process. So just briefly, this is kind of how it works, which looks a little complicated, but look at all those beautiful boxes that we've created, which highlights the wonders of the process. So exactly. So pretty much it starts with our Department of Defense colleagues, as well as our FAA colleagues will send the State Department monthly reports, more or less, of the objects that were launched in the previous month, as well as the basic orbital parameters of those, what country is presumably responsible for that launch. There's kind of like a preliminary determination that says what country was I guess procured that launch, where was the territory launched from, et cetera. And then that goes to our office, and then we essentially go through those lists and kind of do some sort of adjudication to try to determine what is the appropriate state of registry for that object. If you have a U.S. company launches a object on a U.S. rocket from the United States and it has an FCC license, great. That's very easy determination. That should be a U.S. registered object, because we want to make sure what we're registering, per the letter and spirit of the Outer Space Treaty, we have jurisdiction and control over, and we can continually supervise that object. So one thing that's really important in this process is we coordinate with our regulating agencies like the FCC, NOAA for the cruiser license, also to an extent our NASA colleagues for ISS-related things, to see what licenses these objects have, because those are really the biggest regulatory hooks to ensure that if the United States is registering that object, it does have proper oversight of that object, that kind of continuing supervision. So we will, Marissa and Carl are very familiar to me sending them many emails with long lists of objects, asking them to kind of check their records about what licenses those objects may have. If we don't have enough information, we will sometimes reach out to those companies to ask. Sometimes they are in coordination with other countries to see if that country will register their object. We will often also reach out to other countries to discuss that, and I'll go into that in a bit more in a second. But essentially, once we make that kind of determination, we'll put all of these objects that the U.S. will be registering on a list, and then we send that list via an overball through classic UN processes to the UN Office of Outer Space Affairs, or UNUSA, which is based in Vienna, and then they maintain the list of space object registration for all members of the Registration Convention and Outer Space Treaty, and then they will eventually put that on their online registry, and then you can consult that and see that all of the objects are there. We're also in the process of standing up our own domestic-facing registry. We had one maybe 10 or 15 years ago that had some web issues and was taken down, but we're working on it. So there's that process of it, and then if I can just go to the next slide. So just as mentioned, we do a lot of coordination with other government agencies on this to try to understand, what is kind of the licensing and regulatory picture of each individual object. If there's missing information, if we can get additional information on that. But I think kind of the thing I want to focus on more is this need now to talk a lot more with private sector actors and other countries about specific space objects, because what we have found is that for each individual object, you may have it made in one country, the launch may be procured by another, launched from yet another on a rocket that is from country D, and it could be a commercial entity from country C but has a subsidiary in country H, and like you may have 10 multinational touches on this. And obviously some of these are much more impactful, like the licensing aspect and where it was launched out of, than others, but to get that full picture then requires a lot of coordination both with the operator of that object as well as the other country. Because a further complication is that different countries have different interpretations or criteria for what they would use to register an object. And sometimes that will differ from what the criteria and understanding we have about how we would register an object. So oftentimes that can involve, pretty close coordination and discussion with another country where, we may think that there are aspects of this that, yes, the U.S. has a hand in, but in terms of who would be the more appropriate state of registry, it may be, country B, and hopefully they agree with that assessment, but they may not. And then that may require, further discussions back and forth or some sort of diplomatic note kind of laying out our understanding of the situation. And that has definitely taken up a lot more time recently to try to kind of build a shared understanding among other countries about what it means to be a state of registry and kind of what we all should hopefully be collectively looking for to make that determination. And I think that as we've seen so many more private sector activities, and you also have a lot more interesting situations, our FAA colleagues mentioned hosted payloads. You could have a hosted payload on an object that may have a separate license or may, have been from a different country. Like, would that affect registration? When you have, rendezvous and proximity operations and say you install an object that was initially free floating and say registered by a country onto another object, so now it's a contiguous piece, would that change how the registration of that object works? There are a lot of questions now about how would things like this work on the moon or on the lunar surface. And so the concept of registration, which is a very important one because it's really about transparency, about what a nation is doing in space, that it's taking accountability for what it's putting up there and notifying people, hey, this is what we have, is a really important function, and we want to make sure that we're doing it well and in a comprehensive way. And I think just based on how rapidly the space environment is changing and the number of actors, I think there's still a lot to do on our end to make sure that we have a good understanding with other countries as well, because it's important that kind of, most if not all countries are kind of on the same page. So I'll stop there and just happy to talk more about registration forever later.
Thanks so much, Ryan. And in particular, thanks for an illustration of some of the more complicated potential scenarios that can come up in this context. I was wondering if you could just maybe speak a little bit to how this relates to the UN long-term sustainability guidelines, particularly related to registration.
Sure. So there's the 2019 long-term sustainability guidelines that the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space adopted by consensus. COPUOS consists of about, will be shortly 106 member states, and it operates by consensus. So if anything moves ahead, it means that every single country, ourselves, Canada, China, Russia, France, all agreed to it. So it's pretty big if something is moved forward, and as you can imagine, takes a long time. This took about a decade. So there were these 21 guidelines for the long-term sustainability of outer space, and one of those guidelines, A5, is about registration and the importance of registering space objects, how you can do that effectively and efficiently. It recommends doing it pre-launch. We do it post-launch currently, but that's the dream one day. And I think, understanding that process and how we can improve that process, both because there is this international kind of voluntary guideline on it. And as well, when Space Policy Directive 3 came out, one of the goals there was also to improve the effectiveness and timeliness of space object registration, to make sure that we're doing this in a way where, we submit these reports, in as fast but as also as accurate and comprehensive of a manner as possible, and, try to work with our interagency colleagues to improve that. We developed a standard operating procedure on how to do that. We've been trying to coordinate more with our interagency colleagues, and the FAA payload review process is certainly very helpful for that. So, I think all of this is in service of trying to be more transparent and kind of lead by example about, we think these LTS guidelines are very important. Here's how we're implementing them. Here are the challenges that we're facing when implementing them, which I raised a couple here. And I think it's important to kind of have those discussions on the international stage as well to both, share those challenges with other nations and also ideally learn from them. Some countries like New Zealand, for instance, seem to have a very proactive stance on registration. They register things before launch. I'll get emails from them like 6 months before a launch happens asking about an object that I've never heard of. So there are certainly ways I think that we can improve our processes as well, and it's important to talk to other countries about that.
Thanks again, Ryan. Next, I'll turn to our colleague from the Department of Commerce, NOAA. Glenn, could you introduce yourself and give us an overview of NOAA's role in the payload review process?
Be happy to do so, Marissa. Yes, my name's Glenn Talia. I head up that part of NOAA General Counsel that has pretty broad responsibilities. We represent the National Weather Service. There. Thank you. We represent the National Weather Service. We represent NOAA's space programs, too, our GOES program and our POSE program and our space weather programs, and plus a number of other international satellite cooperation arrangements. We also represent all our internal and external research, extramural research programs, and also have responsibility for environmental compliance and safety. But perhaps most relevant for this group is we serve as the Chief Legal Counsel for the Office of Space Commerce, which is an organization that's received greater prominence in the last few years, actually has been moved into NOAA under our Undersecretary. And within that organization, there's a division known as Commercial Remote Sensing Regulatory Affairs. And this is essentially a division that issues licenses for the operation of private remote sensing space systems. And these systems are required to be licensed under the Land Remote Sensing Policy Act of 1992. And so CRISRA issues these licenses to private persons in consultation with our interagency partners. The Department of Defense will look at the system from a national security perspective. Our colleagues at State Department will look at it from an international obligation and foreign policy perspective. And assuming everything all checks out, then we issue a license. And so we've been doing this now since the early 90s. I've been doing it since the late 90s, so I'm really dating myself here. So I'm actually younger than I look, but so we've been doing it quite some time. We've issued over 200 licenses covering more than 1,000 satellites. And so it's a pretty active area of space. And so how else this plays into the payload review is that a lot of times the payloads that being reviewed are basically remote sensing systems, private systems. And so when we receive a payload review package from FAA, the first thing we'll do is we'll check to make sure that remote sensing system, private remote sensing system, has a license from NOAA, has been issued a license. And then we'll also check on the status of the license. Is that license current and up to date? Most of the time it is, but there have been a few instances where it's marginal. And we'll also do a cross-check with the cross-check involving the information that FAA has and the information that we have concerning the system to make sure that it all checks out, right? And in most cases it does, but there have been some instances where we don't exactly have the same information concerning the payload. For example, like orbital parameters, that type of thing. In which case we will then work with the contact the licensee to try to resolve the discrepancy. And so that's basically how our payload review process works. I'll say that OSC also coordinates with other parts of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security, BIS, for example, also NTIA, National Technical Information Agency, not technical, but it's Telecommunication Information Agency, which is that part of the government that actually licenses government satellite operations and spectrum usage. So we'll do a coordination with those parts of Department of Commerce also. And there have only been a handful of cases where we've had issues. For the most part, everything checks out, and we can give FAA a thumbs up from our perspective. So.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to note that recently the Department of Commerce, NOAA, Commercial Remote Sensing Regulatory Affairs Division had issued a request for information related to regulations specifically on post-mission disposal. I was wondering if you could just maybe briefly describe that and maybe talk about how it might relate to some of the issues we're discussing here today.
Yeah, happy to do so. NOAA, for many years, included mission disposal, orbital debris mitigation requirements in its licenses. It was in the regulations and in the licenses, and that was in response to the requirement in the statute that companies or operators dispose of their system in a manner satisfactory to the president, right? So we had our own standards for determining when that legal requirement was being met, and we operated that way for many, many years. But because most of our systems, if you're coming to nowhere to get a remote sensing license, you're likely going to the FCC to get a license for spectrum usage, right? And as you all know, FCC includes the same type of requirements in their licenses, orbital debris mitigation requirements. So part of a regulatory reform effort that occurred in the late teens and culminated in a final rule in July of 2020, we decided to remove the orbital debris mitigation system disposal requirements from our regulations and licenses. Again, expecting that that would be addressed, those requirements would be addressed in the FCC license. And so we thought it was a good policy approach because this was a deregulatory effort. We want to try to make it easier on industry. We don't want to over-regulate, double regulate. And so that was our approach. But recently, we've been approached by a number of several applicants that are proposing multinational remote sensing systems. And these systems, are operated potentially by a consortium of people from the United States, from other countries. And in some cases, they may decide or have decided not to pursue a license from the FCC for their spectrum usage. Instead, they've gone or will go to a foreign administration to get a license a spectrum usage license from those administrations or that administration. And some of those licenses, those foreign licenses, may not include system disposal or orbital debris mitigation requirements. So the question is what to do. What do we do about this, right? So that's what the RFI is about. It's basically asking that question, what do we do about this? And so, we put it out for a few weeks, and we received quite a few, I'd say, substantive comments back, different ideas on how to maybe get at the issue. One approach is really to do nothing, right? Okay, is this a big problem? We could do nothing, but that's really not a viable approach given the emphasis on having a sustainable space environment. This is something that's been recognized by the Department of Commerce as being very important. It's a goal that we should be pursuing. And so doing nothing really doesn't seem to be a viable option. Another approach could be to go back to our old way of doing things, putting requirements in every license on mission disposal and orbital debris mitigation. But that really wouldn't seem to make sense either because, for a lot of systems actually have those requirements because the FCC is including them in their licenses. So maybe the Goldilocks approach, I'll call it the Goldilocks approach, is to focus in on just those systems where they don't intend to obtain a license from the FCC, and their foreign license does not include orbital debris mitigation requirements, to perhaps then include conditions in those licenses. I will say that we have recently addressed a few cases, recent cases where companies, the exact scenario I'm describing, and we were able to work it out with the company to actually get them to agree to include orbital debris mitigation requirements in their license, which is not a good approach because our regulations say we can't impose conditions retroactively, so we just can't do it on our own volition. They've got to agree, and that's not a good approach. So that's whatever we decide. If we decide to take some action other than the status quo, then we will need to likely do a rulemaking under the APA, and that would be essentially start with a proposed rule, get comments from the public, and then issue a final rule, which would be our decision on how we would approach the problem. So we're actually a good period of time away from that because again we've just got the comments in, we're considering the comments, and we want to do whatever we do here. We want to do it in a smart way. We don't want to have a bad impact on the industry overall. So basically that's kind of where we stand. And as far as how this affects payload review, it would be an interesting situation if we ever got to the point where we had a payload with no orbital debris mitigation requirements that's ready to be launched. And at that point, I don't really want to give an answer on that one because I'm not sure how we would deal with it. A remote sensing payload, that is, right? I don't know how we would deal with it. Hopefully, we'd be able to work with the company and to negotiate a settlement with them, an agreement with them on what requirements should be included in their license. I'm hoping they would be reasonable, but there's never a guarantee on that. So,
Thank you so much for the informative
You're welcome.
response. All right, and last but not least, I'll turn to my colleague, Carl Kenzinger, to give us an overview of our role at the FCC in the payload review process. Carl, can you describe what we look for in the payload review?
there you go.
Yeah, and I think we do have some slides. There we go. Let's see if I can advance. There we go. So just if you're an FCC frequent flyer, just bear with me. These are kind of meant to be kind of high-level points and overviews for the more general consumption. So the U.S. FCC, just to be clear, licenses non-governmental satellites that utilize radio communications. So that covers a pretty broad swath of space operations, but that is the scope. There are three types of licenses that the FCC issues. One for amateur satellite operations, also for experimental satellite operations, and finally what is known as Part 25, which I guess would consider the standard or commercial type operations. For all three types of licenses, the common elements there are submission of information about radio frequency and orbital technical parameters, an orbital debris mitigation plan, and draft ITU filing materials. So across the board for all three processes. What we look at, the governing principle for review of those materials is the public interest standard under the Communications Act, and then is implemented through regulations, the FCC's regulations. And one of the ways we also address for the public interest is with license, including conditions in the license. So that can cover a range of topics, and we do have also, but typically then conditions requiring that the operations will be consistent with what's submitted in terms of information to the FCC. And then just to note, there are operational rules, and for debris mitigation, for example, we have several of those that have been adopted. So in terms of the legal framework, just to cite some chapter and verse, Section 301 of the Communications Act is the sort of source for most of the licensing provisions and licensing activities. And broadly stated, it prohibits the use of or operation of a radio frequency station, and that would include a satellite, a space station, or a ground station, an earth station. And so that has to occur, those operations have to occur with a commission license. Section 25102A of the rules also elaborates on that somewhat, states it somewhat differently, but requires an approval for the operation of energy or communications or signals by space or earth stations. So again, the two sort of operative provisions, two of the main operative provisions in the FCC rules. I just turned to an enforcement advisory from 2018 where we elaborated somewhat on those provisions and how they're applied. And one of the questions here is sort of the timing of when licenses and authorizations are obtained. And one of the things I think we have learned in recent years is that the point at which payload is integrated into the launch vehicle is actually kind of a critical point. That's difficult to go back from that. And so the FCC Enforcement Advisory reminded that licensing is mandatory, and then talked about integration into launch vehicles and how that's an important point for a satellite operator, the point at which really need to have a license in hand. Or run some very significant risks, I would say. The other part was we also cautioned launch service providers on this point, and I think we have seen the more focused collection of information from launch service providers about these particular points as a result of that. So just talk a little bit. Now that we're done with, I think we can finish with slides. Talk about how the FCC participates in the payload review process. And the first thing I would say that we do is just to check the information that we receive from the FAA, the information that's collected from the launch provider, and we check that information against what we have in our records. And the places we would look for information in our records would be for space station licensing, the FCC licenses for a U.S. licensed spacecraft, any market access filings that so a non-U.S. licensee but has a market access with the U.S. And then we also obtain information, relevant information in the Earth Station licensing process. A number of U.S. Earth stations are used to support non-U.S. Satellites, and so there will be often statements in those Earth Station filings about the intended regulatory home for that particular satellite. So those are sort of some of the areas we check. And remarkably, we do find discrepancies. So I would say that's one of the areas, probably the baseline area that we check and try to provide that information early to our colleagues at the FAA. The other, I think, thing that we have looked at increasingly are things that, I guess, registration is sort of the indicator, where there is something, and some of the information that's disclosed within the payload review process, often there's a line for a column for what country is the intended country of registration. When that shows up as U.S. and it is a commercial entity, and the authorizations are through a different country, that is the point, I think, where we also then will take a much closer look at that particular payload as to why there is that disjunction between the authorization and supervision and the intended registration. So those are I think the main points that we've been looking at in the FCC participation in the payload review process.
Thank you, Carl. Just maybe one or two follow-up questions. So in cases where we might expect that there would maybe typically be an FCC license, so for example, maybe a U.S. company, what if the company has an ITU filing from another administration? Or what about a license from another administration? What are some of the things that we might think about or look at in that case, or those cases?
Yeah, so, I think for a typical satellite operation, there are going to be licenses, certainly once it's up and running, but maybe even before the system begins operation. There will be licenses from multiple jurisdictions. That's just a part of satellite operations. And so the question that really comes up is what type of non-U.S. license is essentially a substitute that takes that particular satellite out of the U.S. licensing regime. And the the structures, the way that different countries approach licensing. There are a number of different approaches. I think in the U.S. we have kind of from one perspective, quite a streamlined approach in that with an FCC license, you can pretty much proceed to launch that together with your launch license. Obviously, need a remote sensing license if you're engaged in that activity, but outside the United States, I don't think we can view the structures outside, the approaches outside the United States in quite the same way. And typically, there are two tiers. There's a space operations authorization of some kind, or that there should be, but there isn't yet. There are a number of countries who would like to have one and feel they have that as an uncompleted step. And the other part is the ITU authorization, radio frequency authorization. And so, this is one of the things we've had to look at. And I don't think we can take for granted that an ITU filing through another country is an authorization sufficient for removing that particular satellite operation from the potential need for an FCC license. And so, one of the things that's one of the areas where we have some ongoing discussions with individual missions, and have had a number of cases where we've had to address that. So I would just say, as a general guideline, if and to try and make a few simple things. It's quite a complex area, but to make a few simple statements that are perhaps helpful in figuring out how to proceed for companies. One is, if you're pursuing non-U.S. authorization and you are going through all of the authorization processes that are available through the other country, and by that I mean a space operations authorization and an ITU authorization and whatever other local requirements there are in that country. If it's a company that is essentially domiciled in that jurisdiction, that's not what we're particularly concerned about. There, the registration, we know that generally results in registration by that particular country. And I'm thinking of the countries, France and the UK perhaps have some of the best known, best developed arrangements in this area, where there's a fairly clear space operations authorization process and a fairly clear ITU authorization process. So if you're going through those processes, I think we're not looking very closely at those. But if there is a U.S. company and it perhaps has an ITU filing and only an ITU filing and doesn't meet the criteria for space operations authorization through the other country, or you're unsure about whether you meet the criteria, and I think this is one of the areas. I would say that is something that it's an issue that needs to be addressed early, and well before we get to this particular process that we're talking about today, which is the payload review process.
Thank you. And I think on that point, maybe a good way to wrap up is back where we started with the FAA. I was wondering if maybe Sabrina or Stacy, if you could just give us your perspective on what happens from a practical perspective if a concern is raised during the interagency review process, and what might put a particular payload at risk or a launch at risk potentially of getting held until the issue is resolved.
So I'll start with the nuts and bolts. Basically, when questions or issues are raised, we just go back to the agency and try to work it out with them. another reason that I had mentioned earlier of trying to work with the agencies on a regular basis is a lot of questions come up kind of outside of the bounds of the payload review. And so we have found sort of talking directly to different agencies, we can sort of talk about those issues and keep them outside of the formal payload review. As for, what happens next if we can't resolve, I'm going to turn to my lawyer.
Big bad lawyer.
Yes, the bad news. No, I mean, I would just kind of reiterate, I think the theme of this panel is that we all work very closely together to ensure that, or to sort of do our best to make sure that these issues don't come up too late in the process, because as was pointed out, it can be very costly if you've already integrated a payload, right, to then be told that that payload does not have the appropriate approval, and you have to either postpone the launch or remove the payload in order to proceed. So as Stacy pointed out, we have a pre-application process at the FAA. Please raise issues. We all know each other very well. We're good pals here. We can point you to the right place if there are complications. Worst case scenario, if you do not have your payload approval on hand and you are integrated and your vehicle is sitting on the pad, we do have the authority to say, hold up. We do not want to do that. I don't think anybody wants us to do that. The reason that we do have that authority is for, again, our public health and safety, national security, foreign policy obligations under our statute. But I think that those issues can be resolved if you do come to us early and if you point out anything unique about your payload, or if you choose to get that payload approval done sort of separate from the licensing process, which would give you even more time to work with the FAA and the other agencies involved to make sure that those issues are resolved early.
Thank you so much for that. And I guess maybe as some closing thoughts, are there any other observations on this topic from our panelists or other thoughts given the discussion today?
I'd like to make one point, just emphasize what Sabrina said, that it makes it very difficult on the federal agencies when you basically have a rocket on the launch pad ready to launch and they don't have the necessary approvals, right? And I can think of a couple instances where my office has been in that situation. And for us, we don't have authority to tell you not to launch, right? We don't have authority. You can launch your payload, but if you do, then you run the risk of being fined once you're up in space, because the law requires that you actually have a license from the Secretary of Commerce before you operate a system. So, I mean, in some instances we told them, well, you better put duct tape on the imager if that's your only alternative. Not kidding. That was a serious way a number of years ago. So, yeah, it's best to make sure that you have all your approvals in place, and otherwise it can cause a huge runaround for everybody, and it gets very difficult and ugly.
Yeah, let me just elaborate on that as well. I mean, I think exactly the same point. And, I just say one of the areas that would be important from the FCC's perspective is if you have any question about whether an FCC license is required, including even if you have been working through a non-U.S. regulatory process, but a U.S. company, for example, please raise those questions and raise them early. Again, getting to this, the payload review is sort of at the last stage of the process, and it's quite close to when a lot of the launch activities are happening. In addition to duct tape over the sensor, I mean, we've seen the deployer being wired and soldered shut, or zip tied or whatever. I mean, there have been those kind of things. Those are not good outcomes at all, and they're not desirable for anyone. And so definitely something we would like to see avoided. So again, any questions in this area, please raise them early. And I do think one of the things that happens is that, the registration process, which is kind of at the end of this, happens after the launch. It is possible to launch without the remote sensing license. The FCC license, technically, you don't have a violation until you're in space and transmitting. But if that leads someone to conclude that they can wait, that's a very bad. That's not the correct conclusion. Really the best practice, the internationally recommended approach, the long-term sustainability guidelines, everything points toward trying to have these issues outlined, pinned down, resolved, set, so that when the launch happens, people are focused on just the basic technical operations and not these sort of regulatory issues.
Can I just also add, our regulations don't allow you to launch if you haven't obtained the necessary licenses, authorizations, and permits. So you need those FCC and NOAA licenses to launch. I think for us, what we need to figure out when it does become complicated is, are they required? And that's when we reach out to FCC and NOAA to make sure.
And I don't want to be the only one not to say something, but I think just on kind of piggybacking what Carl said as well, and what he spoke about earlier too, is that, like we were saying, different countries have different ideas about what would have them register an object. So, probably never best to assume that if another country does an ITU, spectrum coordination means that they will register your object, because many countries do it, but then they don't view that as giving them sufficient, jurisdiction or control or other kind of provisions to actually register that object. Whereas, if you apply for an FCC license and through that process, that often does give us enough of a regulatory hook to register an object. So I think also have conversations with whatever, entity you are working with. You can reach out to us, but I'll probably refer you to Carl. But, I think having, as was mentioned, having those conversations earlier saves everybody from many frantic emails down the line to make sure an issue is hopefully resolved.
Thank you. And yeah, that seems like a great note to end on, is that, we're here trying to provide as much information as we can. All of us are working together. We're all communicating with each other on these issues regularly. And I know this for the FCC's part is part of our transparency initiative, where we're putting information available on our website about satellite licensing. If you have any questions about whether you need one, as Carl mentioned, reach out to us. And don't make assumptions about maybe where things stand in terms of your licensing, so to avoid running into some of these issues at the end of the process. So with that, I'll just, again, thank all of our panelists today. Thank you so much for participating in this event. And I believe Julie will be wrapping things up for the Space Bureau.
And will not be stealing your remarks this time. I just want to say thank you for coming today. Questions can be sent to satinfo@fcc.gov. Our panelists have been tremendously helpful. I've learned a lot today as well. I learn every time. I think what I'm most impressed with is when we were having these discussions, which were a result of not wanting to ground anyone, the thought of a workshop and having us come together and have this discussion was met with great enthusiasm. And we're trying to move at the speed of industry. Things are getting more complex. We're trying to work through them with government to make sure that we're able to keep pushing the space economy and getting you where you need to be. So don't get grounded. Thank you again to our panelists, and we're just so grateful for our interagency collaboration and our work with our stakeholders. So thank you. Yay.